I'm Dr. Steve Rittner of the Rittner Floral School in Boston, Mass. It's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today because we've got a really neat demonstration planned for you, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And right now in Boston, it's spring. And springtime generally brings all kinds of wonderful flowers and materials available to us. And one of the things we thought it would be kind of fun to play with in today's demonstration are a few of the flowering branches. And we have here some pear branches. Aren't they gorgeous? Look at them. Look at the way they're blooming. And sometimes a very simple solution works so well. Here we've got our pear blossoms. We've put them into our container, and notice how this is really quite spectacular. The trick on something like this, though, is in the container, because what we're doing is we're using a container that has a fairly narrow lip to it. If you look right here, the waistline on this container right here is very narrow. It makes it very easy for us to take our beautiful blossoms, our branching flowers, and to take them and to drop them in. They stay nicely in place for us. And this kind of design is so easy to achieve, yet very, very elegant. These pear blossoms are courtesy of Pat Riccardi, wholesale florist in Boston. And we're very fortunate to have them. And I think you can see how you can do some beautiful things with these. Isn't it a kind of funky container? Look at it. It's essentially a funny looking little guy. He's got feet. He's got a funny face. And we have some floral foam placed in there as well. And we've got a little bit of Spanish moss for mechanics. And we're going to play with some additional flowering branches. Again, from Pat Riccardi's in Boston, we have some beautiful forsythia. Look at this stuff. Isn't it gorgeous? Isn't it beautiful? Well, we can get some really wonderful effects with it. And look, by placing our forsythia in here, we can come up with something that is really going to be quite spectacular and very, very showy. I'm going to take some more pieces of forsythia and use them in this arrangement. I love these materials. They're just great. And to have these things during the springtime here in Boston, we love using some of these things and working with them. And we can come up with all kinds of really great effects in our designing when we're playing with these. So notice, by taking some of our forsythia branches and just kind of working them around like this, how I can come up with something that's quite large and quite spectacular. I'm going to take another piece and put it over here. I really call this fun with flowering branches because I'm certainly having fun, and I can come up with some really, really neat effects very, very quickly and very effectively. Of course, we're going to, in this particular case, mix it a little bit with some other things. We have some lovely larkspur here, and we're going to take some of our larkspur and use the contrast in color between the purple of our larkspur and the yellow of our forsythia and come up with an interesting contrast and work them in here to come up with quite a spectacular showing. Look at how fast and easy this is coming together in terms of coming up with something that's interesting, that's pretty, that's rather unique. I'm going to take another piece of my larkspur and work it over here. So I'm working from the back of my design. Let's add some of our other materials. We're going to use some of our face flowers as well. If we can play with some of our linear elements in terms of our forsythia and our larkspur, certainly adding some face flowers works nice. Carnations are always a good one for this because carnations are big, they're showy, they come in a wide variety of colors, and they certainly lend themselves to any composition that they happen to be placed in. Let's add a few more, one over here, and we'll add another one over onto this side here of our design. So this is coming out very, very nicely. One of my favorite flowers, and of course one of the favorites of everybody, the rose. You never can go wrong with roses. And so we're going to add some roses to our design, and I'm going to add a rose up here. Let's move it over just a little bit. Rose over here. And then let's work another rose in over here. I'm going to take another rose and work it over here as well. Now let's see, what else do we have? Well, we have some more of our larkspur, so let's add a little bit more larkspur in. And I'm going to work some of my larkspur gradually coming down towards the front of my design. And you can see this gradually developing very, very nicely for us. And let's see, we played with some of our red roses up here. Let's add some pink roses. Isn't this a gorgeous one? Look at it, it's beautiful. Let's take that and work that in here as well. So I'm playing with both my red roses, my pink roses. I'm going to work a few more of my red roses right here. And let's take another one and work it here. Goodness, I love playing with these materials. So you notice that we're playing with a contrast of our branchy flowering branches, our forsythia here, our straight linear larkspur, and now we're playing it off of some of our more face flowers. Now I'm not just going to start with my forsythia and forget about it. Let's work a little bit more forsythia in, and I've got another piece that I'm going to work in right here, and still another piece that I'm going to work in over here. And I've taken my forsythia and cut it down so we get some colorful aspects of this. Let's see, I've got some of my green palms. These green palms are spectacular. They're coming in so nicely now. And so here, let me show you, my viewer, a close-up of these green palms. They're very pretty. Some of you who have been following our video series have noticed that I particularly have a thing for these, that anytime I get a chance to work with them, I try to incorporate them in because I think that they're very pretty. They give a really, really good show to our design, and they add really a nice factor. For a flower that is considered an everyday kind of flower, the palm certainly holds up well, gives great coverage. I think you can see that we're coming up with a very, very pretty composition on this using a combination of things. I have a few more of my roses. Let's work another rose or two in here. I'm going to work one right over here, and another rose. Let's add another rose over in here, so that we're gradually really filling in very, very nicely with our materials. The beauty of modern floral designing is mixing all kinds of beautiful elements together. And although we showed you initially how we can take our forsythia, our pear blossoms rather, and come up with something that's very pretty just with the pear blossoms alone in a vase, you'll notice that when we start taking something like our forsythia and then start mixing it with other things, using the contrast between face flowers and linear elements, that we can come up with something that is also very, very unique and interesting. So two different approaches to flowering branches. One, taking our flowering branches and placing them into a lovely vase and enjoying them in their own right, just standing on their own as we did with the pear design. On the other hand, we can take some of our flowering branches, as we've done in this particular design, mix the flowering branches in with some of our face flowers, along with other linear elements such as our larkspur, and come up with something that is truly, really interesting and pretty and showy and spectacular. This is a funky design. I think that anybody who would receive one of these or use one of these would certainly find it kind of a fun one to play with. And you'll notice that it's really coming together quite nicely for us. We do have some really cool ivy right at the moment growing on our building here at Rittner Floral School in Boston. So it would be kind of nice to play with a little bit of that. So I'm taking a few sprigs of my ivy and I'm working some in, coming up a little, some coming hanging down here a little on the edge, because after all, if we have the ivy to play with, it certainly would make sense to use a little of it. I love taking advantage of ivy that's growing naturally on our building and using not only the ivy, but sometimes the tendrils and things that are from them and working them into our designing. And that gives a very natural kind of an effect to our arrangement. And then, of course, it's always important to cover our mechanics. And so I'm going to take a little bit of our Spanish moss, and incorporate some more Spanish moss into the interior of our design to make sure that all of our mechanics are nicely clean and covered, which is considered good workmanship. At Rittner's Floral School in Boston, we love to do all kinds of styles of designing. We do some styles that are very, very classical. We do some styles that are very, very contemporary. We teach our students how they can mix different materials together for different psychological effects in their designing. We do hope that you enjoyed this brief presentation here at Rittner's Floral School today.